Good morning. This is Kenneth and Heather with the Advancing Equity Coalition, here to give you our final thoughts of 2021 on this Minneapolis school board and all their meetings and all their stuff. And so we're so excited to be at the end of the year with you all. And thank you all for listening, by the way. Heather, how are you doing on our last recording of 2021?
I'm ready to slide into winter break. It's
Yeah.
never felt so good.
Yeah. Very cool. So let's get into it and hear our final thoughts for 2021. And so, as we mentioned in our recap video last night, the board shared a reconfiguration of their mission, vision, and now commitment to what they want to accomplish with this strategic plan. And so, the strategic plan, there were some concerns that we had shared, that community had shared around the vision and the mission, not specifically naming students of color. And so there was some back and forth at a recent school board meeting around how can we change the language, what needs to happen, all of that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so they took that feedback, and instead of incorporating it directly into the vision or the mission, because of different constraints, whether it was legal constraints, political constraints, whatever, they decided to add a section to be around the commitment. And so, as you can see here, Minneapolis Public Schools, through the strategic plan, commits to achieving their vision by intentionally focusing and prioritizing resources and actions to significantly improve the experiences and outcomes of Black students, Indigenous students, students of color, and their families. And so, Heather, when you see this commitment, what does that mean to you? What does that mean that Minneapolis Public Schools will be committing to in the strategic plan, and with the metrics and conditions that were shared last night? Do you think we're meeting that commitment?
You know, first of all, I'm very grateful that it was specifically called out. Right? We talked about that. We met with parents who felt like it needed to be called out. And then also I think of the words, of one of my favorite teachers who said, like, we cannot trust what you say because we see what you do or do not do or have refused to do, right? And so when I think about that phrase, I think I like that there's a commitment, but I worry that practices and policies and procedures, I don't see enough pointers leading to meaningful change to mean that we can carry that commitment out. We can talk about that in the ESSER budget money. We can talk about that in the practices. We can talk about that when we talk about declining enrollment. We can talk about that when we talk about the reality of what we see in global majority schools versus what we see in white, racially isolated schools. And so these are all amazing commitments, and yet we are actively doing the opposite of this in so many ways right now. On the other hand, language is important, and hopefully we can hold the school board and the school district accountable, so that when we see that a school has one school does not have basic needs met while other schools are going uninterrupted, we can say, hey, this is not what you said you were going to do for the next 5 years.
Yeah. You know, we talked a little bit about this during our other video, but when I think it's important, like you said, that the language is there. I think it's important so that we can hold the district accountable, we can hold the board accountable to this commitment, right? Without that commitment, yes, we always say, all students will succeed, but we then see year after year after year that not all students are succeeding, only white students are succeeding in Minneapolis public schools, and even they're struggling right now. And so I think the language is important, that it's there, and that they've said that this is their commitment with this strategic plan. I also think that last night what I saw in the board meeting is rough. And again, I said that during my slide of the night. I said it during my two better moment. But I think that it is hard because we are coming from a place that is our baseline, our starting point today is really, really bad.
Yep.
Students of color are getting suspended at 5 times the rate, almost 6 times the rate as white students. What students of color are reading at less than 25% proficient. That isn't great. We have a serious problem when we're talking about our teachers of color versus the amount of students of color that we have in the district, and huge disparities in representation, right? Like we just have a lot of problems. And so some of the progress that the district is naming does satisfy that commitment, right? Like significant improvements in the outcomes, which would lead to but still only lead to less than half of our students of color reading at grade level to start the 2026-2027 school year, right? Or our students of color only being suspended twice as often as white students in this district, right? Like those are significant improvements. And so that satisfies the commitment, but is that type of goal setting what's healthy for our city, for our communities? I still think the answer is no. And I'm really disappointed that, again, board members did not ask the questions, did not push the district on these metrics. Several of the board members said that they're good with these metrics, that they're fine with these metrics, right?
Yeah.
And I think that is really, really difficult. I understand the idea of needing to be realistic, not wanting to overpromise, all these things, and also that this academic institution cannot get students of color to read. I just don't know what the answers are, right? And I'm glad, again, the commitment is to significantly improve, the lives of students of color. But also, there are so many things that are also not being talked about in the strategic plan that I think is problematic. And I can get into that, but first, before I go into that, I want to hear your thoughts, Heather.
Okay, so what I really want to just pull back and talk about what this commitment feels like as a parent in this district. So what we see is a commitment to improve the amount of teachers of color over the next years by 3%. 3%. Now,
I think the number is officially they want to go from like 18.9 to like 22 point something. Yeah. So yeah, 3%. We're both like that 3% is getting us to 22%, which is not great.
Yeah. So as I send my children to school in a Minneapolis public school every day, where all of their teachers currently are white, many new, when I see that number, I just think that's not gonna change any reality for my children. For these two children, right? And so I think that's the thing. It's like we talk about these things in data and we talk about these things in theories and percentages, right? But like each percentage is it's like a child. It's a human. It's someone who needs to see themselves in their teachers. And I gotta just name further that percentage increase feels both not enough and kind of unrealistic when we start to talk about the fact that we're going to be declining enrollment. So how many more new hires can we make?
Yeah, I want to get to that because you wrote a great op-ed that just got posted on MinPost today. So I want to talk about that in a second. But I also think the other part of this that feels challenging and unrealistic, and this is a point that I have brought up many times through the strategic planning process, is it's really important to think about the intersectionalities of our students of color, because our students of color contain multitudes, right? And so
Right.
we have so many of our students of color who like need to be challenged and need to be in like gifted and talented programs and need to be pushed more and more. We also have so many of our students of color who are homeless and highly mobile, right?
Yeah.
We have so many of our students of color who need special education services, right? And for our district in this strategic plan to not even mention any of those things, especially our special education and our homeless and highly mobile plan, like no wonder you're not going to get more than 49% of students to read at grade level, or like that. How is this a thing that we continue to do? And last night when the board was having this conversation around conditions and the superintendent was laying out, we need to have these conditions in place, and we, as different things come up, like we can't get distracted by them. Like this needs to be our focus. Your focus is excluding special education, and your focus is excluding homeless and highly mobile students and the plan to educate them. Like that is a problem. And I do not know why they do not want to talk about that. I do not know why no one is bringing that up constantly, every single time. This is a glaring, glaring, glaring hole in their strategic plan. If they do not figure out special education, you are not going to figure out education for our students of color because you have over identified so many of our students of color in special and provide giving them IEPs. And some of them need them, some of them don't. It's a whole range of things, but at the same time, like you aren't taking a look under that hood. And so if you do not take a look under that hood, I don't know how you are going to reach all of the students. And that feels really, really challenging to me. And I am so confused. I really don't know. Like what are like in your do better moment, you talked about the board having all these conversations, like not having any linear thinking. I can't track it either. And I can't understand what they're trying to get at and what they're focusing on. If they're not talking about metrics, if they're not talking about special education students, if they're not talking about our homeless and highly mobile students, like the glaring holes in the strategic plan, but they want to have some like, yeah, I don't know what it was last night, and what it constantly has been is some like some type of coded speechifying thing. That's what they seem to be focused on, and I just don't understand why.
I think our city is desperate for better.
I think our city is desperate for better, and I think that our board is so afraid of accountability and so afraid of and is so just like oppressed in their thinking around what our students of color are capable of and
Mm,
what we can provide for them that
yes.
they can't think beyond like half of our students and like they can't dream that more than half of our students in 5 years can read at grade level.
When we when we know that there are shortages in different areas for teachers right now, and we know that those shortages and that place where we continue to allow needs to go unmet end up showing up in racially isolated schools or high poverty schools, and we are living that right now. I have very little faith that we are going to push that we are going to shift that and say, okay, we really are going to prioritize the needs of students of color. That would mean that in a finite system, somebody else would have to go without, and I haven't seen any proof of that happening.
Yeah, and that's where the commitment needs like that's what the commitment needs to live out. And you know, coming back to your op-ed, I thought what was really interesting last night, and it was kind of a comment that maybe flew a little bit under the radar, but I want to highlight it because I do think it was important. Is Director Cerrillo asked the superintendent and senior officer Moore, you know, what are the conditions that need to be in place for our students to be reading at a 90% proficiency rate and have 0% or zero disparity between suspensions between white students and students of color. And the answer that Senior Officer Moore gave was it was a little windy as well. It wasn't direct. But at the very end, he said, like, we would need much more teachers of color. And he listed two other things. And I'm sorry, I cannot remember what the two other things are. It's not it wasn't a lack of that they weren't important, but it was just like, wow, yeah, you said teachers of color, we would need many more teachers of color. But then you look at the strategic plan and you see only 3% increases in the next 5 years for the amount of teachers of color that we have in the district. And I was just really struck by that, and struck by then, you know, your op-ed that just got ran by MinPost this morning around the fact that we're under, like, this district is undercutting itself. The system is undercutting itself by continuing to hire, you know, up to 30% of our hires or new hires are teachers of color. And but then like if we have challenges with constant challenges with our budget, which our board refuses to talk about, by the way, and we have, you know, declining enrollment, then teachers are going to be laid off. And in our current system, they're going to be our most recent hires, which is supposed to be our big push for teachers of color. And so we know what it will take to get like a vast improvement in the outcomes, whatever the commitment said, right? The outcomes and the experiences of our students of color. It would take many, many more teachers of color. And yet we have a system that continues to undercut itself from getting to that place. And I thought your op-ed really spoke well to it. So I don't know, do you want to talk a little bit more about, what you were trying to identify in your op-ed?
Yeah, I mean, I think I really wanted to talk about the fact that if we continue to move this system through the policies and the practices that we currently have, it is unrealistic that we are going to improve the opportunity for children like mine to have a teacher of color in their MPS career. It is not realistic that as we continue to see enrollment decline, um, and I'll just name two that I think the tension that we're really seeing right now, we're seeing it in my children's school, is just this relationship between ESPs of color and white teachers, and that those power dynamics that are happening. I think that I've heard more than one, ESP talk about that frustration. Um, and so we there's a real lack of understanding of the students we are serving in our district. And I've seen it both in my children's school and other schools that I've had opportunities to visit. And so when I see that, when I look at those metrics and when I look at what makes a difference and when I look at where children grow and which teachers I know get growth, we desperately need to improve our teacher of color ratio and amounts. And it feels critical to me that not one teacher of growth that improves the quality of education of a student of color, and white students, by the way. Teachers of color are good for white students too. But it feels critical to me that we act fiercely, swiftly, and that we really live our values, that we do what we say, right? What we say, that we want everybody is saying anti-racist, and yet I can't understand how it is anti-racist. Everything in our district points to like these anti-racist values, and how is it anti-racist to lay off a teacher of color in this district? It is not. We can't just keep the status quo and then continue to say that we are living anti-racist values. We must do what we say.
Right. And I think what was really important about what you shared in your op-ed was like this small window that we have, right? Like they've been negotiating now for 10 months, essentially, and off and on. And they've brought up multiple proposals around teachers of color, and it's been a little bit of a game. And right now, there is no time for games. And that line struck me around, we have 2 months now, essentially. Otherwise, we're going to lose teachers of color again in this system. And so I just thought that was really important. And I thought it was really important last night that one of the conditions that were laid out to even get to the 3%, not anything bigger than that, but even to get to the 3%, is that we need to create vacancies so that we can put teachers of color into those positions. But then, if we have the same layoff system without any exceptions to try to recruit and retain our teachers of color, we're going to lose them. But then another condition that was set was really talking about how are we challenging seniority in our contract language, because that is disproportionately privileging our white teachers and negatively impacting a majority of our teachers of color.
Right.
And so what is going to be the commitment there to say we need to abolish things that protect white teachers, right? And whether that is reforming seniority, changing the way that it looks, whatever, so that we have our teachers who our students need the most in the classroom, and also live out our anti-racist values. Like Director In said, the district has anti-racist values, the union has anti-racist values, They have the same goals. Why is it so difficult? Because we are not willing to actually commit to anti-racism. We are committed to good PR. That is what we're committed to. We love to look good. We hate to do the hard things. That is Minneapolis, period. Not Minneapolis public schools only. Minneapolis, period. So that's where I'm at the end of 2021. I hope you all are at a better place than I am, but yeah.
I think what, one of the things that's really hard about our city is that we like to have sort of like really polite conversations and really like soft-edged conversations about really hard realities. And I just need to name that, like, I think the Black and Native children of this city deserve our ability to lean into hard conversations. You only get one childhood. You only get one chance to read and write at grade level, right? You get one chance. And I think that the children of our city deserve the adults of this city stepping in and saying things that make us uncomfortable, that challenge the status quo, um,
That hold
that
each other
make
accountable.
hold each other accountable. Like, I get it. This is not easy. And I get that we're talking about giving something up. I get that we're talking about things that not a lot of people in this city want to talk about. But I believe our children are worth that risk. And I think any amount of brilliance in students of color is too precious to waste.
Totally agree.
All
Totally
right.
agree.
We're signing off with this one.
Yeah. 2021. Thank you for a roller coaster year. And thank you all for listening once again. And Heather, thank you for doing a majority of these with me. It's been a good time recapping and really processing these conversations with you. So thank you all, and I hope you have a great rest of your winter break and have a successful and happy and joyful start to 2022. We'll see you then.
Bye.